Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us with this Derwent and Michael's class tonight, where we're going to talk about paper. We are probably going to you're going to know more about paper than you ever bargained for by the time we're done today. It's so nice to see so many friendly faces in the across the screen here. So thank you again so much for joining. If you have questions as we're going along, you can type them in the chat, and Molly from Derwent is here and she can ask those questions to me. If she can't answer them in the chat herself, then she'll just throw them right over to me. And we'll go from there. I have gathered dozens and dozens of different papers across my desk here, and I've divided them into 6 categories. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through each category of paper and talk about the pros and cons of each type of paper, each surface. And you're going to see examples of artwork that I've done on those surfaces with colored pencil and mixed media. And we can even do some demos on some of the papers, just some kind of easy, simple demos, since we only have an hour here tonight. But my goal is by the end of the class that you'll be able to determine what paper is going to be right for your project. So please don't hesitate to ask any questions as we go along. Hopefully I'll anticipate some of those questions before they come. And you'll leave with a lot of knowledge. So if you have a piece of paper or a notebook and a pen handy, that would be really great for jotting down some notes or questions as you think of them. Or you might even see some brands of paper that you'd like to try sometime when you're out shopping. So a lot of these brands that we're going to be looking at, like Strathmore and Kensington, those can be found right in store at Michael's or on their website. So you can have a browse around there if you're looking. And there may be some papers that are new to you and some that are old favorites. So you can also feel free to chat with one another in the chat if you have a favorite paper that you want to recommend to someone, or if someone asks a question and you notice it in the chat and you know the answer, feel free, because sharing is caring. And that's what I love about my community here, is we all help one another out. So without further ado, I'm going to change my camera view so you can look at my desk, and we're going to start going through the different surfaces of paper. All right, I had a couple artworks down there just for white balance purposes. Okay, so I like to break the papers up into 6 categories. And the first category that we're going to look at would be what I consider to be super smooth. These are papers that have very little tooth. The smoothest one I have right here, I would say, would be the Yupo paper. Now I'm going to grab a set of colored pencils, just so that I have some to demo with if you want. But again, if you have a specific Derwent pencil you'd like me to try, just let me know. And I have most of them within reach here tonight. So I just have a little template here in case I need to do a little blending circle or something. Now, Yupo is a very slick paper, and it's actually made of plastic. And if I hold that to the light, you can see it's almost reflective. It's got a fairly matte surface, but you can see the shine on there, and you can see that there is really no tooth. Even though there's no tooth, if you want to use a soft pencil like a Derwent Chromaflow or Color Soft, it will stick. So a nice rule of thumb that I like to say is, the smoother the paper, the softer the pencil. So if, say, you have arthritis, or you just get really, you find color pencil a little tedious and you want to make short work of it, if you use a smooth paper, you're going to fill the tooth of that paper, and see how we got really nice coverage. There's not any grain. It's covering up really well. Now, where you may end up with a little bit of frustration on a smooth paper is if you want to blend colors together. So if I want to blend out with some yellow and make some orange, I'm not going to be able to layer up too much. I'm going to have to blend by burnishing. And you can see as I start to color over with the yellow, it's almost scraping up that paint, that pencil that we have underneath. So we're not going to be able to get too much on there. But because the paper is smooth, we can still get a pretty vibrant effect. But what happens when the paper can't hold the tooth? I'm just going to bring this up a little bit closer. I'm not sure if it will show or not, but you start to get this almost balling up of material. That's because there's nothing to hold that pigment on the paper. So smooth papers you need soft pencils, and you're not going to be able to do a lot of layers, which may be perfect for the type of art you like to do, or it may be frustrating. Any other paper that is designed for marker is going to be a smooth paper. So you may be a mixed media artist and you may like to do marker artwork, but sometimes marker artwork can look very choppy and unrefined. So you can go over that with a pencil and smooth things out like I've done here. Now, these are both marker pads. One is thick and one is thin. So on this paper, you can see nice and thick. On this paper, really thin. It's almost see-through how thin it is. So if I wanted to go on one of these illustrations and I wanted to add some colored pencil on top, I can, but it's not going to let me put much down. It'll let me add a little bit of kind of zhuzhing or rouging of the color, but it's not going to let me like cover up those inked lines that I put there because it doesn't have the tooth. It's too slick. I could maybe put like a little bit of gel pen, maybe a little bit of colored pencil, but I'm not going to be able to adjust this very much because of the smoothness of the paper. This paper is also very smooth, but it's more of a Bristol surface. And a Bristol smooth would be almost like a cardstock feeling paper, but it's got enough grip that I can put on some pastel tones here to zhuzh up these crystals, which I did already on this. That was just water-based marker. This has a little bit of colored pencil in here just to kind of smooth out some areas of marker. One of my favorites is this one right here is my daughter playing the guitar, and to get the skin tones, I did the flat coloring with just a peach marker, and then I did the chroma flow in like the teals and the pinks to bring a little life to that skin tone. And because it's just not quite as slick as the regular thin marker paper, it's got just enough grab that it can hold that. So that would be a Bristol, and your Bristol can be found in many brands, Canson XL, Strathmore. Most like companies that like make markers will make a Bristol pad. It's all very similar. It's so similar that I would almost suggest that they may even come from the same company because they're all so similar. But anything that's marker or smooth Bristol, or even a smooth cardstock like the Nina Classic Crest or Expressive Blending Card, or any of those cardstocks that are sold for card makers or for marker use, would be in the super smooth category and good for soft pencils. And if there's any questions on the super smooth, Molly, you can let me know. And otherwise, I'm going to move on to this.
Lindsay, someone
Yes.
asked what the brand name of the current paper was. So I'm not sure exactly what they were talking about. I'm not sure which one they were referencing.
Okay.
So I'm not sure.
This Yupo, which is the plastic paper, that is by Legion, and it's called YUPO. I think the cover might be different now. I think it might just be kind of like most of the Legion papers kind of look like this now, but Legion makes it, it's called Yupo, and it's a polypropylene paper. And then the other, like this thick paper here, and this paper here, those would be examples of Bristol like papers. They work well for markers. They work well for adding some colored pencil accents. Not a ton of pencil, but you can go over marker to kind of fill in a little bit, or to fill in the gaps in your marker collection. Not perfect for just doing straight colored pencil because of the limitation on how much you can put down. But if you use a soft pencil, like if I go to let me just go to a fresh paper here. If I just take a sheet of Bristol, I can let's do a blend. Let me do a quick circle blend here. And I'll just do a red, yellow, orange blend. So because this is smooth, I can't get too many layers. So I'm going to start off by coloring this yellow, more dense where I want my highlight. And then I'm going to start in with my darker color around the edges. And I'm just doing this really fast and dirty, guys. You'd want to spend a little more time. Also, I would try to be careful to do overlapping ovals and not be real sloppy with my coloring because I don't have the layers in which I can adjust them. So just try to be a little careful because every mark counts on a smooth paper. And then kind of overlap here with the orange. But because you fill the tooth a lot quicker on a smooth paper, you actually can work a lot quicker on a smooth paper. You can start to see I'm starting to get a really nice blend here. And this will go for any Bristol smooth paper. Bristol comes in 2 finishes, smooth and vellum, and we're talking about the smooth right now. Or any cardstock, smooth cardstock, or thick marker paper. Your thinner marker paper really is going to be not very appropriate for colored pencil, just because it's too slick and it's so thin that it's really easy to damage the paper when you're coloring on it. But there in just a couple minutes, you can get a really nice blend on a smooth paper, as long as you make sure to be careful where you put your marks, that you're not like coloring all willy-nilly. And you could smooth that out further with odorless mineral spirits. Bristol paper will take odorless mineral spirits just fine. And just a quick little demo with the ChromaFlows there. Okay, and the next one we're going to look at will be the smooth variety. So that was super smooth. And I've got quite a stack here in the smooth variety. I'm just going to bring that over here. And maybe we'll just take one of these one pad at a time so my camera can
Oh, hey, Lindsay.
Yes.
People are asking if it's better to brandish or use a blender pen on colored pencil with smooth paper. Someone else asked if a quick paper blender would work as well. So you're getting some questions about blending on smooth paper.
Okay, with smooth paper, generally you can just use, you can get like maybe 2 or 3 layers on your pencil. You can blend by going over your pencil with a lighter color firmly or with a blender pencil firmly. That's called burnishing. Or you can use odorless mineral spirits or alcohol or like a clear colorless blender pen. And when you use a solvent like alcohol or mineral spirits, you actually will break down the wax and remove some of that wax. So you can go over it and do more on top if you use a solvent. If you use burnishing, which would be like a burnishing or blending pencil or a lighter colored pencil or a white pencil, then you're not going to be able to add anything on top. So it really just depends what you prefer. As far as a paper stump, I don't have great luck with just a dry paper stump with colored pencil, but if that's a technique that works for you, by all means, go ahead and do that, because any paper can be the right paper for you, even if it's not a recommended paper. If it works for you, that the proof is in the pudding. You know, go for what works best for you. Oh, and I see Kelly Flint's asking about Copics Blending Pen. Yeah, that's alcohol. That absolutely can work. My only caution with like a Copic marker, because it is kind of expensive, is that the wax will clog up into the nib. So you may want to use the chisel nib for that, which is a little more resilient, or make sure you have a replacement brush nib if you do want to use your brush nib, because you will wear it out a little faster than blending with your regular old, chisel nib. Okay, I saw another question. Have I ever used a pencil that didn't blend out? Generally, if a pencil doesn't blend out, it's on the wrong type of paper. Now we're going to look at smooth papers. One of my favorite smooth papers is hot press watercolor paper. And what that is, and how to remember this is think of hot press, think of a hot iron. That is watercolor paper that's really smooth. And if you look at the texture of this paper, it's not reflecting any texture at all. It's not as shiny as our Bristol, but it's still very smooth. It's kind of a matte texture here. Now, I also want to talk about your paper composition. Anytime you're getting paper to do artwork on, you want to make sure it's acid-free. You can even find cardstock in Staples that's acid-free. You can find a lot of your craft cardstocks. Any of the cardstock that Michaels has for scrapbooking will be acid-free. That's a nice smooth surface that you can do color pencil on. Try to choose something that has a little bit of tooth, not super slick smooth, but you can use whatever color you like. It's a wonderful surface. Now, acid-free is great. That usually means it's a cellulose paper, which means it's made from wood pulp, and it's been buffered to keep it from degrading. Another paper type you want to look for is cotton paper. Now, your watercolor papers will often be cotton if they're kind of on the more expensive side. And cotton paper is nicer, even nicer than acid-free paper because it's naturally acid-free and it will resist degradation for even longer. And well, you'll see with the Derwent Lightfast paper, that's actually 100% cotton, and it's designed to last 100 plus years. So keep that in mind. If you're going to spend hours and hours on a piece of artwork, you may wish to spend a little extra for a cotton paper. So the reason I like hot press watercolor paper is because I like to do mixed media artwork. So I could do a watercolor background, really get a lot of that work done quickly, and then go and do the fun stuff over top with colored pencil. And that's one of my favorite ways to work for the speed of it. Because you don't have to fill in every little speck of grain of the paper to get a nice, like the cedar waxwing, they've got their wings look waxy, and to get that effect with just colored pencils would take a lot longer. Being able to put a base coat of that kind of grayish brown and then work over with colored pencil really takes a lot of the work away and makes the painting process so pleasurable. And you can see that smooth watercolor paper just works so well to capture the surface of the bird and the fruit. This is a project that you can find on my YouTube channel and also on Derwent's website. Again, this is on hot press paper, which is nice because I can use a Micron pen or a Derwent line maker or any other art pen I want and not worry about damaging the nib of it. So if you like to work with really fine tip pens, you're going to want a smooth or super smooth paper so you don't damage the nib. This right here was done with the Derwent Inktense pencils, and having this nice smooth background helped conserve on my the product that I was using. The rougher the paper, the more product it's going to take off your pencil. So you're going to wear down your pencils faster. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Some other smooth papers that I really like are the Strathmore mixed media papers and also the Strathmore toned sketchbooks. The mixed media papers come in a few more colors than the toned sketchbook papers do. You've got white, and I do believe they've released a black. It's that same texture, not as smooth as Bristol. It's got a little bit more tooth to it. It comes in gray. It comes in tan, white, and black. And let me just show you the different moods that you can get just by having a toned surface. You're not only limited to white and cream when it comes to art papers. And the nice thing about a light tone surface like this, even if you're working with a translucent pencil, it's still going to show up on this paper. So like these works were done on gray. It gives you a little bit cooler of a undertone. This one actually gives me a nice cold undertone. I wanted this woman's hands to look cold as they're holding snow. I was able to do marker, color pencil, and also white pen. Now on our tone tan, we get a much warmer, cozier vibe, like this cup of tea, or this portrait, or a nice autumn leaf. This is marker with pencil over. These are all alcohol marker with pencil on top, colored pencil on top. And this was a previous Michael's class, which you can find on the Michael's website if you're curious about that. But again, you got a cozy feel by working on a toned tan paper. So I highly recommend giving those toned papers a try. These mixed media papers can also handle paint like gouache or acrylic paint pens. I wouldn't soak them. I wouldn't put a ton of watercolor, but like a watercolor marker or an alcohol marker is very appropriate on this paper, and it just works so well. So I was able to put the bulk of my work down with gouache, and then I could just go right in with my Derwent ChromaFlows and add that realistic ribbon by just putting a little shading and highlight on the gouache I already put down, or put a little shiny highlight on top of the gouache I already put down. It's a very easy way to get to make a laborious medium, which colored pencil can be sometimes, and turn it into a very fast medium. And I have another, this was on the white paper. So like if you wanted, say, a black background, but maybe you don't want to work on black because you got some really light luminous areas that you don't want to have to fight against a black background, because pencils can be translucent. So you're looking through those layers of pencil and the light is bouncing off the paper. I can just do the background with a black marker, and then I can do the skin and the little dragon and egg with a colored pencil and have the best of both worlds. So that's on your white paper, the white Strathmore mixed media. You can also get black mixed media paper like this This Fabriano, this would be very similar to what the black mixed media paper for Strathmore would be. Another couple beautiful papers. These two are very similar because they're 100% cotton. We have the Derwent Lightfast paper. This is a fairly new paper. Now it is a natural white. So this is another thing I want to talk about. That with your papers, often you will find white and then bright white, especially with watercolor papers. The reason I often will opt for a natural white paper is because I know they haven't used optical brighteners such as bleaches. Now, while having a beautiful bright white paper like this, it looks, it just has a little extra pop to it, right? And that looks really nice, and it really makes that artwork show up. But over time, bleaches and optical brighteners in papers can make them degrade a little faster. So if you're, spending 20 hours on that portrait, working on a paper that's a natural white, something that's formulated to last a long time, 100% cotton, is a good investment. But maybe it's not for, like, say you want to do a sketch of your succulent or something that you're only going to spend, 45 minutes on or something. So this is the Derwent Lightfast. Again, like I said, it says acid free. It also says 100% cotton. Sometimes your cotton papers will not say acid free, but if it's 100% cotton, you can guarantee it's acid free. So it can be a little confusing, but I just want to put that out there because sometimes it won't say acid free, but it will say 100% cotton. This is a hot press paper, and it is archival. The Stonehenge, which was originally meant as a printmaking paper, also works very well and has a very similar, very soft, softly textured. It's smooth, but it doesn't feel slick. Basically, you want a paper that feels smooth, that doesn't feel slick if you want a smooth paper. You can capture really good textures on a smooth paper if you're trying to get a smooth texture. Something like the skin of a fruit or crystals. Those are done on Stonehenge. But again, any of these papers are going to give you similar results. It just depends on if you want a toned surface. Do you want 100% cotton? Do you want a brightened surface, or do you want a natural surface? You have the choice to pick exactly what you want. But these would all fall in the same category. And the other, like I mentioned, these are all nice and thick papers, which I would recommend a thick paper. But say you want something that's a little bit less expensive and you just want to maybe practice in a sketchbook, these tone tan and tone gray sketchbooks are really nice. And I have to say, I recommend them over white, especially if you're a beginner and especially if you don't have a lot of supplies. So one of my favorite products is the Derwent drawing pencils. And they are a set of neutral pencils, and they're all very light fast. And they have nice thick cores, and they're going to last you a long time. I really like these because you don't have to have a lot. A 24 set is not going to set you far back, and you can work these on a gray paper or on a tan paper. And what's really nice is we'll just do our little a little blending ball example again. I can say I want to let's say I want to draw a ball, a gray ball. Okay, I can go ahead and I could put a cast shadow off the side of that ball. Now this would be like you're going to a drawing class and you want to, and you're going to be doing some time sketches. You're going to sketch very quickly. I can use my white for a highlight. I can use the gray paper for the base color of my ball, and I can use the black as a shadow. So with just 2 pencils, I get 3 tones. But then I can even vary those more by, I can color firmly with a white and get a nice bright highlight. I can color softly with the edge and let it fade out to that medium gray, which these Strathmore toned products are kind of more in that medium gray. It's really nice. I've worked on some gray papers that aren't quite gray enough. They just look dirty. I've worked on some tan papers that aren't quite tan enough or that are too tan. It's really nice. I have no affiliation with Strathmore, but I just really happen to like that product. And then I can go in with my black. And by the way, these are available open stock, so you don't have to buy a whole set if you just want to try a couple colors. In fact, I would not recommend buying a full set of anything until you've tried a couple of the pencils open stock to see if you'd like it. And one thing I also want to mention is that if you go to derwent.com and you look at any of their pencils, there is a downloadable PDF, usually at the bottom of the page, and you can download the color chart, and you can see all the colors in the range, and you can see how light fast each color is. So if you're trying to choose like a red, yellow, and a blue, or maybe you're just trying to choose, like maybe you want to make your own custom set of like 12 or 20 colors, you could pick colors that are the most light fast if that's important to you. If you're working in a sketchbook and these are not going to be hung on a wall, it does not matter. But if you're thinking about potentially selling your work, that's something to keep in mind. So just with 2 colors on toned paper, you're able to get a very quick little sketch, which, you know, is really important if you're taking like a life drawing class and you got to sketch quickly, you got time sketches. You don't want to have, you know, 72 pencils to try to pick from. You want to have a couple things and you want to be able to work quickly. So that's a real benefit of having a toned paper. I recommend a larger sketchbook if you are going to do any classes, because you'll have a lot more room to work. I've got an example here that shows the difference between a 5-minute sketch and a 1-hour sketch. So this was done with Conte crayon in 5 minutes. This is the same pose done in 1 hour with Derwent drawing on toned paper. If I didn't have toned paper and I had to work on white paper, this would take me 2 hours because I wouldn't have that base layer down. So I just want to show you that how much time a toned paper can save. Now, this is very thin and very smooth paper. It's not really great for Conte just because it smudges so much, but just for getting a quick sketch down, it's really wonderful. I highly recommend this paper. You can do pastel pencils, but pastel pencils will also transfer over. So not a great, these smooth papers are not great for charcoal or pastels, but definitely good for colored pencil because the wax binder does help them adhere to the paper so they don't smudge. All right, do we have any questions on our smooth paper selection before we move on to the medium smooth?
Lindsay, yeah, you've got a couple of questions. Sure. Let me see here. Someone was asking how many layers of the drawing pencils can you get on the toned sketch paper?
On the Derwent drawing, I would say probably about 5 because that's a pretty soft pencil. Not as soft as like the Chroma Flow, but yeah, you could probably layer up 5 light layers. If you're going to go heavy, maybe 3.
Okay. Someone else was asking about the Pro Color pencils. They feel like I cannot pronounce the name of the paper. And she said she feels like if she presses a little hard with Pro Color, it feels like she's embossing instead of burnishing, and it happens to her with several different papers. And I think someone was suggesting to put something else underneath it. But I know you've worked with Pro Color quite a lot, and we've discussed just how misunderstood that line can be sometimes. So I'll leave it to you.
You definitely want to avoid the softer papers with your Pro Color. So do you remember how I was talking about Stonehenge paper and how that used to be a printmaking paper? A lot of our color pencil papers, or a lot of the papers that color pencil artists really love, came from the printmaking industry. And the printmaking industry papers are thick and soft. They're not as heavily sized as a watercolor paper. And when you color with a hard pencil on it, or you draw with a hard pencil, it wants to bite into the paper and emboss it. And so you want a paper that's a little harder sized. A hot press watercolor paper would behave a little bit better for you, but I would even go with a harder paper that's got a coating to it, such as a pastel matte or a sanded paper. And we're going to get to that actually when we get to our coated rougher papers. And I think we'll talk about Pro Color specifically then. But yeah, sounds like you're probably using a paper that was more designed for printmaking to begin. And printmaking paper was designed to absorb water and to press and hold both letter pressing, debossing. It was meant to capture the engravings on plates. And with a pencil that's really hard, like Pro Color, it just kind of scrapes into it. And And yeah, is a little more difficult to work with. You want a harder paper, that's a soft paper. So we'll talk about harder papers as we get into the more rougher ones. But if you used the mixed media paper, though, the Strathmore mixed media, I think that would work quite well with you from the standpoint of not denting it. However, I think you want a more texture paper for pro color in order to get the color payoff that you probably want, because it's such a slow to wear down. You know what? Let's just grab the pro colors real quick. Got everything stacked underneath my table. Let me just try pro color on the mixed media paper. I'll grab a white one just to see here. And we can just do a quick we'll do another circle and see, you know what? And another thing with when you're using a really hard pencil, don't keep the paper in the pad because you're just adding extra cushion. I've got a really dense craft mat here. It's a quilter's mat, and that will help it'll probably help it from denting it too badly. And let me grab my template. We'll just do a real quick little circle because I want to get through those other types of actually, you know what? Let's do some cross hatching because I want to see how much I'm going to dent here. Let me I can feel a little bit of I can feel the texture there of that denting into the paper. But I think you can avoid it, especially if you keep a sharp pencil. You should be able to fill the grain of this paper with a sharp pencil without denting it. But yeah, if you use pressure, it will dent it. But this is more of a dense paper than like a printmaking paper or a Strathmore or Reeves BFK or any of the kind of thicker drawing papers. Yeah, I think this would work for you. I mean, I'm getting a pretty decent color payout there. My pencil's not really as sharp as it should be for this, but I think that paper would work all right for you because it's pretty dense. So that was the Strathmore mixed media paper. This is what it looks like. It comes in I think it comes in 6 different colors. So you can find that at Michael's. You can find that at most arts and craft stores. And it's pretty affordable. But it's not what I would absolutely recommend for pro color.
Can you show the front? Can you show the front of the tin of the pro color?
Yes.
So that, and Lindsay's drawing pencils, she actually has an older set. So the packaging looks a little different now because it's been updated, but the formulations and the pencils are still the same. So just in case anyone notices that difference.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, we'll get to what I recommend for pro color when we get to the coated papers. All right, let's move on to our medium smooth papers. Okay, so your medium smooth papers, those are going to be like your drawing papers. If you have like a sketchbook, generally you're going to have kind of a medium smooth paper. We have kind of a sister paper to the Strathmore, and that would be the Lenox cotton paper. So if you really love this texture and you want cotton, I can recommend the Lenox cotton. That will let you use a firmer pencil. Like this is a pretty firm pencil here that I used, and it has enough tooth that it'll grab the pencil. No, these are not as firm as the pro colors, but I think the pro colors would work all right on it. But then again, this does feel like it could be more like a printmaking paper since it is so close to the Stonehenge, but that's a good option. This was done with just a cheap pencil. I was just seeing what I could do with some cheap pencils on decent paper, and having a good paper does help with a little texture to it. Will help you get more color from your pencils if they're not the highest quality. So that's also a nice tip. If you have cheaper pencils, go with rougher paper because it will help scrape more pigment off of the paper. Now we have our Bristol Vellum. Now I want you to remember the word vellum as being a medium smooth paper. So when you're looking at smooth Bristol smooth, that's really slick. It's better for markers. So when you are in the store and you're trying to buy your colored pencil paper, look for the word vellum. Now, but don't look for vellum because there's also vellum that is like a plastic crafting paper that's like a sheer paper that you would see like in wedding stationery and whatnot. You want like a Bristol vellum or a drawing paper with a vellum surface. It just means that it's got a little bit of texture to it. But Bristol vellum is really nice because you can use, like, this was, I think, just like a inexpensive kids marker I was doodling around with and playing with water. I could put colored pencil on top of that and it would stick with no problem because of the texture of the paper. I don't know why I did my, oh, there. So if I wanted to just go in and add a little bit of colored pencil accents, I could do that and it would stick no problem because of that little bit of texture. Your drawing papers will often say vellum on them. And that's a good sign. It is just saying that there's going to be a little bit of tooth there. It's going to take your colored pencils, like no pressure. I can add in more color on top of these leaves. It's wonderful for the type of work I like to do. So if you like to do watercolor, you can do watercolor markers, not really heavy watercolor, but mixed media watercolor. It'll work fine for those. And a lot of your drawing paper and many of your mixed media papers will also have that vellum surface. The Strathmore mixed media paper are quite smooth and hard, but there's other brands of mixed media paper that are more vellum surface, like the Strathmore Visual Journal mixed media paper is more of that vellum surface. Whereas the Strathmore mixed media paper, I know it's so like, it can be so confusing, but like the Strathmore mixed media paper pads, they're smoother. So just want to, hopefully that makes sense. These are a little bit more textured. And you can find all of those at Michael's and other art and craft stores very easily. These are quite a bargain. These pads here are right around, they're under $10, like regular price. So you can definitely get a lot of artwork done. I don't know how many pages, let's see. They're 90 pound. Oh, I don't see how many pages are in there, but there's more pages in the mixed media, I think, than the Bristol. Now, a couple other very similar papers to these. Now, these are nice and thick, would be the B Vellum drawing paper, the Hahnemühle sketch and pastel paper, the Canson XL mixed media paper. And that's another one that's really easy to find in your art and craft stores. It has a blue cover and it says mixed media. And there's also the Canson XL mixed media rough paper. And I really don't notice a huge difference between the two, except the rough does seem to be more of a natural tone and the original mixed media paper is more of a brighter white tone, but the textures I find to be very, very similar. They're that kind of vellum, lightly textured surface. And that's a great bargain too, the Canson XL line, because you get like 60 sheets, I think. And again, I think it's around $10. So very affordable and a good paper if you like to add a little ink or add a little marker, or even just do pencils on their own. It's a little bit thinner than like your Derwent Lightfast pen paper or your Stonehenge or your mixed media pads, but it's definitely, it's 90 pounds. It's not bad. And even like the budget Arteza mixed media paper is very similar vellum surface. And you can find black paper as well. The Arteza black sketch paper is that same type of material. And yeah, you might want to use black paper. I like to use a more textured paper if I'm going to use black, just because I need that extra oomph to grab more pigment off of my pencils. But you know, these aren't bad. These aren't bad at all. When I have the choice, I go for a thicker paper, just because sometimes when you're just the pressure of coloring and drawing, and sometimes even just like the moisture from your like hands, if you're resting your arm on your paper or you're coloring, just that like body heat can sometimes warp a really thin paper. So just something to keep in mind. This was the Hahnemühle paper. This is very similar to all of these papers I just rattled off. And as you can see, you can get a really good dry blend. This is Derwent Color Soft, that's Derwent ChromaFlow, that's Derwent Lightfast, just to see how those pencils blend on this paper. I still would be choosing a softer pencil for these smoother papers that we've done so far. I mean, you could use the Pro Color of the Artist on this, but I personally would still be leaning to a softer pencil on these. And another one I really like, if you are eco-conscious and you like to do mixed media, is the Hanamule bamboo mixed media paper. But I do know that you can get bamboo paper from other companies, because I did when we were doing the teacher demonstrations in New York for Derwent, we had a bamboo paper that the printer that Derwent had all of my drawings printed on, and it seemed very, very, very similar. So I think there's probably other bamboo papers out there. So on the bamboo paper, it's a mixed media paper. Again, don't drown it with water, but you can do a background wash. You can do markers, you can do colored pencils, you can do pens. You really can layer a lot up on this. And the bamboo line is a little more eco-friendly than, say, cotton, because there's less water needed to produce it. There's less water needed to grow it. And the bamboo might actually be a little more eco-friendly than wood pulp papers too. So this is the bamboo mixed media paper with alcohol marker plus color pencil, just straight colored pencil with odorless mineral spirits, and watercolor with colored pencil, just to see you can get a very similar look with the mediums that you choose to use. So just pick what's right for you, really, is the moral there. So those were all our mediums. Yeah,
Lindsay, everyone's asking about a list of the papers that you recommended. Did you share one, or did I miss that?
I haven't, but I probably could do that and put it up on my blog if that would work.
I think, yeah, maybe a good follow-up. We're getting several questions about it. So I think that would be a good follow-up.
Sure, I can do that. Why don't I do that? And then if you guys just want to catch just the frugalcrafter.wordpress.com, give me a couple days. And so basically I'll probably just, before I pick up my mess here, I'll write everything down and get all that typed up, and I'll embed the Michael's live stream just so we have that. All right, our next set of papers is going to be what I would call medium to rough. And these would be like our watercolor papers. So this is just colored pencil on 140-pound watercolor paper. And you're going to recognize this pad because I keep recommending this brand of paper. It's a Strathmore visual journal. This is their watercolor version. So we saw their Bristol Smooth, which was great for alcohol markers with touches of colored pencil. We saw their Bristol Vellum, which is great for straight colored pencil or mixed media and colored pencil. We saw their visual journal mixed media, which is also good for straight colored pencil or a little bit of mixed media. And they also have watercolor. And this is the cold press version. Now, what I find is that if you are working with a harder pencil, or you're working with a pencil that you're struggling to get the colors out on, if you use a textured paper, now I'm not sure if the texture shows up here. I think it does. You can kind of see the light catching the nooks and crannies of this paper. Cold press paper basically means a watercolor paper that hasn't been ironed flat. Hot press watercolor paper means they've ironed it. They've ironed out all those nooks and crannies. So the cold press paper means they've kind of pressed it. They've pressed it. They haven't heated it up. They haven't used a hot iron. They've pressed it. Think of it, they've pressed it with a cold iron. Think about how effective that would be on your clothing, ironing it with a cold iron. That's like what they did with this paper. It just smooths it out, but doesn't really get rid of all those wrinkles. And that is going to help your pencils perform if you're struggling to get color on a smoother paper. So your watercolor paper, I think, that's probably one of my favorite mediums because I like to do watercolor. So with this paper, it was cold press watercolor paper. I used the Derwent Inktense pan paints, pastel pan paints, and metallic pan paints to make some backgrounds here. I did a blob, stuck some saran wrap on it to get some textures. And then I kind of zhuzhed it a little bit with some pencils at the end, not a lot of pencil, but I did use mostly their pan paints on this. This was their Inktense, the Inktense blocks. They're very forgiving on watercolor paper because while your Inktense pencils or your Inktense blocks are wet, you can keep moving around that pigment till it dries. Once it dries, you can keep layering up, which is really nice, but you need a robust paper for that. Another great paper, if you want to get a brand that you know is going to work really well, the Inktense paper from Derwent is a cold press surface. So similar to the Lightfast paper, it is acid-free, 100% cotton, but it's got a texture to it. It's got the natural white finish, but it's got more of a texture to it. I don't think it's going to show up on camera, But I'll show you a couple different surfaces of the watercolor paper after we get through these different little demos. These are Inktense pencils on watercolor paper. So watercolor paper is what it sounds like. It's meant to hold the water. So if you want to do really wet techniques, you're using the watercolor pencils or the Inktense pencils or the Inktense blocks or any of the pan paints or any of your watercolors or even your watercolor markers. Although I will say watercolor markers are not as good on watercolor paper because the roughness can damage your pens. But this is great for pencils because it's going to grab lots of pigment when you go to color them with your Inktense or your watercolor. This is the Graphite. I probably have, oops, I put my address there. It's probably not very good on the back of those. This is the Graphite pencils. It has water soluble graphite with a hint of color. Works great on watercolor paper. Also Graphite. Now, watercolor paper is robust. It's going to take scraping. It's going to take scrubbing. It's going to take layering. This is the paper you want to use when you are going to abuse that paper. So with this faux fossil, I actually scraped and scratched at it with a pencil and with a credit card and with the back of a paintbrush. So you can get these really interesting textures without tearing your paper up because it can handle it. Watercolor paper has a product in it called sizing, and that's what gives the paper its hardness. So if you're using, say, the Pro Color pencils, you can use it on watercolor paper because it's got a hard sizing to it that keeps you from denting the paper. It helps the media stay on top of the paper and not just soak in and fall in to the paper fibers. So it's just a really strong paper. Because of that extra sizing and the extra durability, the paper tends to be a little more expensive than your other mixed media papers. So keep that in mind and save your watercolor paper for when you need those results. And that's another cold pressed paper. I did use, I used a paint pen on this one. Now your paint pen, so like your Derwent line maker pens, is it the pen? No, the Derwent paint pens would be fine on a rough watercolor paper. Your Derwent line makers, which are more of like a fine tip micron type felt tip pen, those could be damaged on a rough paper. So keep that in mind when you're using pens on watercolor paper, that you're not using a delicate pen on a rough paper, or you will tear up the nib and shorten its life. Because watercolor is my watercolor and mixed media is my primary medium, I do have more examples. This was a Derwent Pro Color on top of a watercolor painting. Because this paper has some tooth to it, it's going to grab that harder material of the Pro Color pencils. They're so the lead in that is so dense that you need a resilient paper for it to be able to lay down, basically, and a little texture. So I was able to do that glow around the cat and the cat's eyes and the bottle with the Pro Color pencils, and it was able to stand up on that. This is the Color Soft pencils over watercolor. I really like the texture that you can get by using a Color Soft pencils. Got the texture of a fuzzy peach and also the galvanized pale. So it's a great way to use two mediums together to get the best of both worlds. I see a question on how to work with pencil marks on cold pressed watercolor paper. Well, the key with that is if you don't want the texture, to get the majority of it done with your watercolor. So this is pencil over watercolor on a cold press surface. I did a really thorough coating of watercolor paint, so I got a lot of the colors, and then I pressed firmly with my Color Soft to be able to get the rich colors there. But if you don't want the marks, then either use a pencil that's really close in what you put your underpainting with. So you're just using that pencil just to zhuzh it up or to add a highlight or add a shadow. Otherwise, you'll need to burnish, which is when you color firmly so that you really you flatten down the tooth of the paper and you fill in the tooth of the paper. So you could also use odorless mineral spirits or alcohol, because the alcohol or odorless mineral spirits will not bother your watercolor paint. They don't see each other because they're two different solvents. So you can do that to also break down marks if you don't want marks on top. But you might want some marks. You might want some like fabricy marks. So I left my colored pencil here a little bit choppier and a little bit grainier because I wanted to have a little bit of a fabricy texture to there. So it just depends on how hard you push and how committed you are to filling the tooth, or making sure your underpainting is similar in color. And here was a watercolor of my daughter. I took this photo of her laying like upside down on a dock. and I did Derwent Lightfast over watercolor, and it was just enough detail with the Derwent Lightfast to pull the painting together so that it worked. And of course, watercolor pencils work really well in watercolor paper because it can handle the pressure of using a pencil on it, and then you've got the water resiliency of being able to use water, and that's the water soluble graphite. Again, watercolor paper is your best surface for your water soluble media. And that was just a straight watercolor pencil there, which was a lot of fun to do. All right, so let's look at some textures of the watercolor paper because it can be very confusing. So your Derwent Inktense paper, I'm gonna try to move my camera up a little bit higher because these other pads that we're gonna see are a little bit smaller. Sorry about any crazy crazy camera moves there. So the Derwent Inktense paper, it's available in this 12 by 16 size. I believe it's available in some other sizes too. And this is a loose sheet paper. So what I would recommend is you cut your paper down to the size you need, and then I would tape it down, especially if you're going to use Inktense or any water soluble medium, which honestly, I think this is overkill if you're not going to use a water soluble medium, because for this surface, you could get you could use a mixed media paper that would be more cost effective. This is for your Inktense products or for your water soluble pencils or any of your water soluble media, because it's got the thickness to handle it and it's got the sizing to handle it. Now I'm going to show you the texture of these with a pencil because I think that's probably the best way to show it. And I'll show you a couple different textures. I'm going to do this on the corner of my paper because this is kind of precious because it's a pricey paper and it's gorgeous and I don't want to waste it. So just to show you the texture, this is a cold press texture, and this is me not burnishing it. This is me wanting to show you that texture so you can see what the nooks and crannies of the paper looks like. So another texture that you probably aren't going to use too much with pencil just because it is so rough would be rough watercolor paper. This is Arches Rough. It's quite rough. Probably doesn't look much rougher than the cold press Inktense, but it is quite a deal rougher. I don't know if the light can catch the texture there, but hopefully you can see this is quite a bit rougher. This would be for like if you want to paint a landscape and maybe you want to go in with your pencils to do a rock wall or sand on a beach or something. This is probably something you're not going to use too often with colored pencils, but you might really want that texture. You might be working in some sort of maybe even an abstract fashion, or maybe you're painting something industrial where you want like the texture of cement, or you really want that grit. That's going to give you a beautiful effect. Now, this is a paper that I don't recommend, and this is where we're going to touch on soft versus hard papers. You can buy handmade watercolor paper. This is Shenzhen handmade watercolor paper, cold press. There's another company called Nujabi that makes a very similar paper. And this is extremely rough and irregular. And while it's a really beautiful surface to experiment with and use watercolor, it is so, look at how rough that is. This would be so frustrating to use your colored pencils on because you're either going to have that grain or you're just going to have to work so hard to try and fill it in that, you know, if you're trying to get the detail of something, the bumps in the paper is going to keep you from getting a really smooth line. And also the paper is really soft, so it's really easy to dent because it doesn't have a lot of sizing in it. So I would avoid the handmade papers for your colored pencils unless you are really just embracing some experimentation. Your handmade papers tend to be softer. Even ones that are smoother, they're going to be softer and a little more difficult to work on. But yeah, those are the watercolor papers that are not the hot press, that are not the smooth. And they can give you some beautiful results, but they are going to take longer to fill in the tooth. But if you want to be able to put a lot of layers and you want to put a lot of pigment down, they're going to hold more because they have those hills and valleys that will grab the pigment. All right. Molly, do we have any questions to address before we move on to our final categories?
Sorry, I was trying to come off mute. No, I think for the most part, some of the questions are really specific, but I'd rather get through everything and then let's see what we have time left.
Okay, I apologize for running so long. I thought I would be through this a little bit quicker, but these two last categories are pretty quick because they're a little bit smaller. And these final categories are what I'm going to call medium rough. And these are going to be, these papers here are great workhorses, and these are your toned pastel papers. They also come in white and cream, but the real benefit to these papers are the fact that you can get them in any color you want. So I think my favorite out of this category would be the Kensington paper. This is how it's spelled, MI-TEINTES, and it comes in dozens of colors, and it's got a beautiful surface. And what I like about it is it's got two surfaces, so you get two for the price of one. You get a relatively smooth surface. It's very similar to our medium smooth papers, like our mixed media papers, the ones that aren't super smooth. And then it's got a textured paper that's a little bit closer to a watercolor paper surface, maybe not quite as rough. But the nice thing about the textured surface is if you're using like maybe you're working on a darker paper, on darker papers, I almost always use a textured surface because I need it to grab more pigment to show up. But if I'm working on the lighter tone surface, I can work on the smooth surface because I don't need it to grab quite so much, because I know that on the lighter papers, my pencils will show up. So even a pencil that's not super opaque, used on the rough side of Kensington will stand up pretty well. And this was just like, I think this was Derwent drawing, just done really, really lightly so you could see the grain of the paper. This is also appropriate for pastels. So if you like to use soft pastels or oil pastels, you can do that as well on this paper. Like I've got some pastels just in that pad that I haven't put away yet. But I love this because it's got two surfaces. So if you're not sure what you need or what you even like, getting an assortment pad of this is wonderful. And you can get neutrals, you can get I don't know if they still sell brights, but they do sell neutrals and grays. And that's a really great place to start because you can try out a few different tones, a few different colors, see what value range you like to work in, and have two surfaces to work from. If you find that you love a color, you can get a pack of a solid color of 8.5 by 11, or you can buy 19 by 21 inch sheets, I believe, of specific colors. And I've got a pad of black here that I use quite a bit. This was done with the Derwent ChromaFlows, and I have a live stream on my YouTube channel if you'd like to follow along with this. But since ChromaFlow is a opaque wax-based pencil, it will stand up on this black really well. And I think I used the actually I think I used a smooth side on this, and it held up pretty well. So a really wonderful paper, you can't go wrong. And then I haven't seen this one around too much. I got this one at a surplus place, but it's the XL pastel, very similar, also has two surfaces. It's got the texture is a little bit different, but it's got a smooth and a textured side. So this is also a really good option, both by the Kensington company. And then there's the Ingress paper, which I've seen come out from several different companies. The texture on this paper is a little different. It's got like a more of a linear texture. I don't like this as much as the Kensington, but some people do. I also find this paper to be a little softer and a little thinner. So this is not my favorite, but it does get the job done. It's fine, but I find it to be a little bit weaker than the Kensington, and that would be my pick in this category of the typical pastel paper or the kind of medium rough paper. Another good option that, especially if you go through a lot of paper or maybe you work with children or you just like to experiment, would be Strathmore Artigan. And the paper, these are the multi-packs. I notice they have pads now, but I haven't tried any of their pads, but their multi-packs are really interesting because these are all recycled papers, or the Artigan paper is a recycled paper. This one has like a grid type texture. Then there you get some that are like a linen, some that are like a watercolor. They're all different kind of textures. They're kind of fun, really bold colors. I'm not sure if these are acid free. The Artigan, I think the new pads are acid free, but the older packs like this, I'm not sure. But it sure is fun paper, and it's really great to experiment on. Now our final category is going to be our rough coated papers. So these papers actually have a coating to them that is really fantastic, especially for our harder pencils like our Pro Colors. This first one I'm going to share is the Uart Premium Sanded Pastel Paper. This is really nice for pastels, but I also really like it for colored pencils. They say it's say archival. I believe it says that it is archival, but I've also heard some artists say that they don't believe that it is. And I did do an acid-free test on the back of the paper, and it did show some acid content on the backside. So I don't know if I love using this paper. I don't know how archival it is, but it is really fun. This was just pencil on the paper. Now, when you use the colored pencil on the sanded paper, it does feel like sandpaper. In fact, if you look at the back side of the paper, I mean, it looks like, I'm gonna put my finger over my address. Oh my gosh. It does have like a grit, like a sandpaper does. So this is Pro Color on the sanded paper. I was able to put many layers on this paper and capture some beautiful textures, like the soft highlight on the tomatoes, the wood grain. It was an absolute dream. And this did not take very long. Generally, your Pro Colors, being a harder pencil, is going to take you a long time to fill the tooth of the paper and to get all those layers in. But this was done, I think, in maybe an hour and 45 minutes for a 9x12 piece. Which I think is quite reasonable for colored pencil work. These papers come, that I'm going to show you here, interleaved with glassine, and I like to actually just take a little clip and put the glassine back onto them, because the pencils can be a little pastel-y feeling. It almost makes them feel like chalk, because as you're coloring over the sandpaper, it actually kind of makes it go a little dusty. So let me just stop talking and scrape my fingernail across this. Can you hear that? It's like a very fine sandpaper is what it is. And if you wanted to experiment for cheap, you could actually just practice on sandpaper. Sandpaper is going to be very acidic, and you will see the printing through your sandpaper from the back side of it probably. But just if you're curious, you want to see how the other half lives, you're not sure if you want to invest and you just want to try it out, that would definitely give you a good approximation. Another paper I absolutely love is the Pastel coated paper, but it does not really feel that textured, but it's got this texture to it that allows you to put up to 20 layers of colored pencil. So because of that, this painting took me forever to do, and I didn't even fill in the background. This is the color of the paper. So my pizza took me like an hour and a half or whatever to fill an entire 9x12. This took me probably 5 hours to draw a magnolia just on maybe like 40% of the paper. So because this takes so many layers. Now I used actually a pencil, the Derwent signature line, which is discontinued, but it's very similar to the Pro Color. It's almost identical to the Pro Color in hardness. And yeah, it takes a long time on this paper, but because you can layer and layer and layer, you can catch such detail, such crispness. It's just a beautiful paper to work on. Just keep in mind, if you're using it for pencil, and this is what the package looks like, if you're using it for pencil, it's going to take you some time. This is also the most expensive paper we're going to look at today. It's I can't remember, I think probably a 9x12 pad is probably around $40 for about 12 sheets. So it's not cheap, but for those special works that you're going to spend 20 hours on, I think it's worth it. It's worth the investment. But maybe check out a few artists on YouTube that use this paper and see if you like their work. They're generally going to be hyper realistic painters, and then see their technique and see if that's something that you think you'd want to invest in before just buying the paper willy-nilly, because it's not for everyone. It does take quite a while to complete a painting on this. I actually prefer the pastel matte for oil pastel, but man, you can do some beautiful work with colored pencil on that. And this is a bargain paper that I recently discovered. It's a Canson XL dry mixed media paper, and it's the sand grain. So Canson has a few mixed media papers. They have the Canson XL pads of mixed media paper, which fall in the kind of medium smooth category, but the sand grain paper actually has a sandy texture to it. So when I first got it, I just tested it out. It works good for soft pastel, oil pastel, and softer pastel pencils. So it works great for color soft. It works good for the pastel pencils. The Pro Color, I was able to blend it out with odorless mineral spirits and get a smooth blend with them, but I preferred a more textured, like I preferred like the sanded paper for the Pro Color, but it did work on these. Let's see what I do with my Pro Colors. I knew once I started bringing pencils out, I was going to totally lose everything on my desk. Yeah, I can't, it's a humongous box and I can't even find them. But the Pro Colors did work on this, but I do recommend this paper for a softer pencil or a pastel. But what's really awesome with this is that it is fantastic for mixed media. I did a watercolor wash. Now my paper did cockle a little bit with the water, but I was able to do a watercolor wash to get my basic colors down everywhere. And then I used crayons to block in the, well, I sketched in with Derwent drawing, then I used crayons to block in, then I went over with my Derwent drawing pencils for all this beautiful texture. And the texture of this paper, let me grab a pencil so I can just kind of scumble on it a bit for you and show you. Oh, here's the one I was using before. I'm gonna do it up in the corner. And this is like 40 sheets for like $7. So it's very affordable. So there you could see, you can, it's got a really nice texture to it, but it doesn't take too much to fill in. And if you like to do mixed media, like you want to use crayons with it, or you want to do a watercolor wash, you know, you can get some really robust color because it's going to grab so much color from your pencil. Look at how solid that beautiful navy is on there. So this is a really beautiful paper. It's in 2 colors. It comes in gray and in natural. It's acid free. It doesn't have optical brighteners. And I don't know why this is so affordable, to be honest. It's a beautiful paper. And this is just straight colored pencil. It's just beautiful to work on. And I don't think it takes all that long to work on this paper. This paper is a speedy paper, kind of like a sanded paper. But it reminds me a lot of the pastel mat, but it doesn't take as many layers as pastel mat, so it's faster to work on. Now, one final thing I want to share is a DIY paper, because I'm all about frugal fixes for when you need to make some art. And I have touched on this. If you took my plum class, my Michael's plum class with Derwent a couple months ago, you probably tried clear gesso. And how many layers does the XL dry mixed media paper take? I would say 7. I would say 7 conservative, like not super heavy layers, but you could blend it out in 3 if you wanted to burnish, but I would say you could get 7 on there pretty easily. So one of my favorite surfaces is to use mat board, because I do my own picture framing. So I always have these kind of windows left over. And mat board is a wonderful surface. So this was our Derwent plum class. This is the project we did together in the live class. And this is the one we're going to do in 2 weeks. So if you are interested in this class, after this one, go pop over to michaels.com/classes. And this is on the 19th, if you're interested in taking this class with me. What we're going to do is use clear gesso. And so if you take clear gesso, it's an Liquitex brand in particular, because some other brands don't work. This is basically like a really gritty, clear substance that you can paint on anything, and it makes it a perfect surface for colored pencil. So I did this one with white gesso, and you can see a graininess to it. You could see shininess where like I just filled the tooth too quickly. So it's got to be the clear gesso. I mean, white gesso looks fine, but it doesn't give you quite the grip that the clear gesso does. But what I love about the clear gesso is you can apply it to whatever you have. If you've got, maybe you finished up a pad of you're on your last sheet of paper and you've got the backing of your pad of mixed media paper and everything's used up, and what are you going to do because you're just desperate, you've got to make some art. You could paint this with the clear gesso and you could do your art on it. You know, it is very versatile. Now, obviously cardboard would probably not be acid free, but you know, you got to paint, you want some surface, that's going to do it for you. But mat board should be acid free. And so you can paint this on there and get this beautiful grip. It will hold pastel, it'll hold colored pencil. It will work with a collage. There's tutorials for all of the, for these on my YouTube channel. It'll take pan pastel, pastel pencil, watercolor crayon, this was Derwent Lightfast pencil. Now, the cool thing is you can use this in collage. So I took a piece of mat board, I collaged some scrapbook papers, I scribbled on some Inktense, I added some clear gesso, and I added some white gesso to tone down the Inktense and coated that. Then I went over with Inktense again and sketched on my flowers. And then I added some ChromaFlow on top of that. And then I did some more collaging and added some Derwent metallic paints. Because this has so much grab and grit to it, it took all those medias on top with no problem. Nothing's flaking off, nothing's going to peel off. Liquitex clear gesso will turn paper you don't like, mat board, cardboard, whatever you have, into a beautiful surface for colored pencil. So I'll show you here. This, it does change the color a little bit. This is a smooth, this is just the mat board that I typically use. It's a crescent mat board. And you can see that it's really kind of shiny. You can see how reflective it is. And this is it after you put the gesso on it. It does leave a little bit of a haze, but once you do your painting, you don't see that. But you can kind of see that haze there. That's the grit. Now let me scrape my fingernail on it. That's the gesso. That's the non-gesso. So non-gesso. So see, you can kind of hear that texture that it has. But man, this is my favorite surface right now because it lets me speed up my art process. It makes my mediums behave better. And it just really makes the colored pencil work go so much more smoothly and it's so much more pleasant. So if you've never tried that, I highly recommend it. You can get a little sample size. I had a little sample size and I loved it so much. I bought a big jug of it and I just refill my little sample size so that I don't have to let the big jug get open to air for too much. But that works great on pretty much all papers, and it works great on the pro colors too. So if you're struggling with the pro colors, that could, putting a coating of that on the paper that you have could really give you what you need. So, I can't believe I was sick last weekend and I didn't know if I'd be able to get through an hour of talking. So does anybody have any questions, Molly, before we wrap up?
Not that I can see, but if there's anything that didn't get answered, feel free to message Lindsay at the Frugal Crafter. Lindsay, is Instagram okay? Is direct message okay? Or
yeah. We'll make sure I check them because sometimes they go into like I don't know, this like hidden folder that I don't always see. So yeah, I will.
If you're not friends with them, so we get the same thing on Derwent. So you can always reach out to Derwent_US as well. And we can always relay the question to Lindsay and get back to you. But again, Lindsay's going to do a post on all the papers that were shared. So give her a couple of days to kind of gather everything and we will go from there. And then just as a reminder, this was recorded. So if you want to replay any parts of it, feel free, it'll be up within a couple of days as well. So thank you all. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you all for spending your evening with me. I know I went fast, but yeah, I will just I will type all this up and put it on my website so that you guys can have it and it'll be a little bit easier. But I hope it was helpful. Please give me a thumbs up and if it was helpful so I can see. Okay, yay. Because I never know. It's like, oh, are you getting what I'm putting down? I don't know. Well, anyway, I want to thank Molly and Hinema for running the show and Michaels and Derwent for bringing this class. And thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. And with that, I will bid you all adieu. Have a wonderful night and we'll see you next time. Happy crafting.